So, hello Zoe, lovely to be with you today. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about the Lockdown Library. The Lockdown Library was really just an excuse to get together some free books from some amazing authors like yourself. So thank you very much for donating your book to the library. And we're actually going to be doing our third edition very soon. So we've got even more books. So it's getting quite big. It's fantastic. But I want to talk to you today, Zoe, about your book. That you've very generously donated, but you've actually not only written one book, have you? Tell us a little bit about your other books that you're working on, and what is it that is your favorite?
Oh, no, I have to pick amongst the babies. But it's interesting, a friend of mine, Gigi Murch, who you know,
Yeah.
wrote a post about that today, which is your favorite baby, meaning your favorite book. So yeah, I've written 3 books that are out. I'm just about to release my 4th book. I can talk about, which one do you want to talk about first? The 4th or the 1st or 2nd or 3rd?
Why don't you talk about the book that's in the library today?
Okay, Loyalty.
Loyalty.
Beautiful, my beautiful purple book, Loyalty. I love this book. It's incredibly hands-on and practical, and it's designed for leaders who lead teams within an organization or lead teams across organizations. And the reason I love it is that it gives really practical strategies on what you can do with your people to make them build better experiences together. So this is really about redesigning the concept of loyalty. And I think that's sort of its premise, and then followed by a series of practical steps. And what I mean by that is loyalty is traditionally known as you are loyal if you stick around. And I think this is a problem in organizations because if people stick around, sometimes they stick around for the wrong reasons and the wrong people stick around. That's the first problem. Second problem is that I think we're fighting an uphill battle as leaders in organizations and trying to keep people to stick around because there's so many choices out there. It's a very mobile workforce. And in some ways it's a false dichotomy. So what we don't want is to define loyalty as longevity. What we want to define loyalty instead is advocacy, so that we create as leaders experiences that increase a sense of advocacy for the organization, no matter how long a staff member sticks around. So they may be with you for a year, and then they go on and do other things, and all along the way, they are singing your praises as an organization, as a leader. And so they become like seeds in the wind, if you like, of promoting and advocating for the business. And I think that is the thing that we must focus on as leaders, is to create advocates, not just people who stick around.
Yeah, that's a fantastic, because you're right. So many times we see people that are in a job because they love the organization, even if they're not a right fit, or if they may have outgrown the job.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you want your people to go out and get different experiences, because that diversity of perspective will bring richness to your organization. And quite a few times, good organizations have their staff members come back to them in a different capacity with a whole bunch of new experiences under their belt, and they're much better able to contribute. Now, this is not to do a disservice to the people who do stick around, because I think there is value in those people who do stick around, as long as they're continually engaged, as long as they're continually growing and pushing themselves and offering different perspective and different insights to the business. You get that growth and perspective in that way too. What you don't want is people just coast and rot, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was Loyalty your first book?
No, it was book number 3.
Wow.
So Composure was my first book, my first baby. And so Composure is about how centered leaders make the biggest impact. And it's a deeply self-reflective book. It's about exploring who you are as a leader and how you can get to that state of having grace under fire, so that you can become calm and centered regardless of what's happening around you. And so in that book, we take a big exploration at how you define yourselves, what's important to you, what beliefs shape your world, and how you can put in place the practice of grace under fire. And there's particular techniques you can use to help remain centered. It's something that I've worked on all my life because I tend to be a bit dramatic and emotional. So being able to come to an equilibrium has been a pretty important thing. So that was book number 1. Book number 2 is Moments, leadership in the moments leadership when it matters most. And that was a bit of an extrapolation or step 2 to the first book. It takes a deeper dive in looking at the tough moments in our world, whether we're between a rock and a hard place, or when we're personally at rock bottom, or when we're interfacing or facing up to other people and having difficult conversations. Those are kind of the 3 moments that matter most. And I talk about the techniques and journeys through each of them. And then loyalty was about team dynamics and how we can craft really cohesive, amazing teams that set people up for advocacy later on. And then I've got the 4th book coming out in July of this year, which is pretty exciting. Is it okay if I talk about that one too?
Absolutely, you have to tell us about it. I want to read the whole series now.
Well, this one's quite different. It's called People Stuff, Beyond Personalities, an advanced handbook for leadership. And this book is about perspective, how perspective shapes our outlook on self, others, and the bigger picture. And my explicit mission in this book is to help people see things differently in a more expansive and inclusive way. And I think this really is the secret to developing wise and compassionate leaders. So I'm pretty excited about this book. It looks different than the other 3. It's got a brand new cover. It's black and white and cover design with hand-drawn characters in it. And it looks at some of the deeper and wider concepts when it comes to leading self, others, and organizations in this crazy context that we find ourselves now. What I mean by crazy context is an exponential world. The rate of change is amazingly quick, and we can't lead the way that we used to. And it all starts with how we practice perspective, and then how we practice perspective on self, how we see the people around us, and how we deal with their emotional turbulence. And that book is really written for established leaders who've got a sense of leadership and want to take a deeper dive in how they can be wiser and how they can look at a longer term picture of what's happening in their business and their teams, and how they can dig beneath the surface of the surface dynamics. People stuff is the stuff that drives us all nuts. And I think if we just do Band-Aid solutions, we're going to get stuck. So we really need to peel back and look at what's driving those things from an emotional point of view and a psychological point of view, and then dive deeper underneath that collectively into what are the structures in an organization that are basically pushing all that stuff up to the forefront. So it's quite a deep dive into the complex problems that we find, which we can often default to calling personality problems, but aren't necessarily always personality problems. It's often a systems or a process problem.
Yeah, and that's kind of the area that I work in, is systems and process. And I often say to people don't come to work to do a bad job. If we don't give them the systems to work within, then they often will do a bad job, but not because they intended to.
That's right. And sometimes the systems that we design set them up to do bad things to each other. Oh, that sounds really terrible. Let me rephrase that. Sometimes the systems that we put in place have unintended negative consequences, and it can create friction between people, which causes, what we perceive as personality problems, but is generally a systems problem, a systems dynamic. And we fix that process or that system dynamic, then all of a sudden the personality problems tend to dissipate. So this is a little bit about what the book dives into, and gives the readers some strategies and some tools and techniques to do that kind of looking through a lens at what the problems are, like giving you X-ray vision to see what's really going on beneath the surface.
And that's going to be really invaluable right now as everybody's redesigning the way that they work. So taking that into consideration as they're designing their new systems, how do people prefer to work?
Yeah, and I think one of the most important things to contend with is talking to different leaders. Like, there seems to be a bit of a consensus that a blend of work from home and office work, depending on the work context, is a desired state. And I think as soon as we start setting up a new structure like that, we need to project forward going, okay, what are some of the unintended consequences with that? What does that mean for face-to-face interactions? More of it, less of it. And what does that mean in terms of developing relationships? What does that mean in terms of creativity and collaboration? And it could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. But we need to do that domino effect work, or that spider web effect work of, when we make choices like that, what does that mean for the human dynamics? Is it going to meet our needs or suppress them? And I think if we do that work while we do the design work, then we can avoid some future problems when it comes to people stuff down the track.
Mm. And I find I'm listening to your books all sound as though they're very much focused on leadership, about helping other people, because I find a lot of leadership books are about making you a better person, but it really is that people stuff that makes you the leader.
I don't think it's an either or proposition. Actually, I think they all go hand in hand. All of my books today, loyalty is more focused on team dynamics per se, as opposed to the leader themselves. Um, People stuff, there's a whole chapter on, it's called You. And the you is focused on you. How do you show up as a leader? What is the archetype that you need to select that serves you best? So I don't think that we can serve others until we best know ourselves first. And each of my books gives us an opportunity, a lens through which to look to see into ourselves and the dynamics that shape us, so that we can show up with more compassion for others. Because it's very easy, if I'd left that chapter out and just started with one of the other chapters called Them, where we look at the four devils of people stuff, it would be very easy to be judgmental and put labels on people and just dismiss them out of hand. And that's exactly what I don't want, and it's exactly what we should not do. We should look first to ourselves and see where we err and where we show up in our shadows and our all lumps and bumps and craziness, and do our work on ourselves first, so that we can show up and assist others to see into themselves, or at least take away the dynamics that are creating or helping drive the not so good version of themselves, which we talked about just recently, which is around the systems thing.
Fantastic. So if your books are for leaders, what's one thing that people can start doing straight away to make them a better leader?
A reflective practice. I think this is a fundamental tool, no matter what stage or stage of experience or growth you are as a leader. As soon as you start doing some interrogation of how you're showing up and the effect it's having on others, and observing the things around you, already you're starting to improve your perception and your perspective. So reflective practice can be a daily think about what happened during the day. Was it good? Was it bad? What happened? It could be a journaling exercise where you think about, this was my intention for the day. Did it get done or not? What were the things that stopped me from doing that? But any kind of pause during the day where you can stop and think, is this working for me or not, is a really essential habit to cultivate at no matter what stage of the journey you're on. And in that reflection, you'll challenge yourself around your insights. And you can often, if you document it in a journal also, you then have a text that you can go back and review, and you can see the development of your thinking. You can also have a look at what the biases in your thinking are and the assumptions that you're making. And that makes you a better leader down the track. You don't fall prey to some of the tendencies that we have when we're oblivious, when we don't do that work.
Fantastic. And so how do people work with you, Zoe?
Generally, I work with CEOs and their executive teams, and we do a number of different things together. We can either work explicitly on their culture. So we start with the team dynamic with CEOs and the team, and then we look at the other sub teams and how their dynamic is working. So we apply some of the strategies in loyalty, say, for example, to help build up the cadence of engagement and interactions in those teams. I also work with delivering some leadership training, whether it's the fundamentals of leadership or the advanced people stuff skills. And I also have a open enrollment program called Amplifiers for CEOs, where they can come together with like-minded peers, and we take a deep dive in some of these advanced people skills practices and apply them directly in their businesses. So the idea is you get your deep thinking and deep work done when we come together as a cohort, get a sounding board from other like-minded peers, and then go away and implement. So it's an implementation, getting done community.
Brilliant. And how do people get in touch with you?
Well, you can find me on my website, zoerouth.com. Now let me spell that out because of my Canadian accent, people often get it a little bit, they miss it a little bit. It's ZOEROUTH.com. It's like mouth with an R. That's how you pronounce it. Or you can find me on LinkedIn.
Beautiful. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your book and your wonderful insights. And I'm sure there's lots of people out there now quickly scribbling down your website to get in touch, because I think particularly at the moment, leaders need all the help they can get.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. You take care.